Okay, I think we're okay now. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is the fourth of our live stream classes, introducing Buddhism and meditation. So in the last class, we looked at the concept of impermanence. So impermanence is the concept that all products are subject to change. So products are those things that are created by causes and conditions. For example, a table is created by a whole lot of causes and conditions and parts coming together to create this product of table. Subject to change means moment by moment, it is actually changing and eventually will finish. So every object, every situation that we're in, all the conditions, relationships that we have are all products. They're changing moment by moment, eventually will finish. So intellectually, we can accept this. It's because it's common sense. But emotionally or intuitively, we don't actually recognize impermanence because we relate to things as if they are permanent. And the fact that we don't recognize impermanence intuitively is demonstrated by the fact that we feel a sense of shock or upset, when things change. We resist change, we suffer, we feel a loss. And this shock and this stress indicates that we're not seeing impermanence as natural, we're not anticipating it or expecting this reality of impermanence. We cling to permanence. But actually recognizing impermanence and meditating on or remembering impermanence leads for us to have a more open, dynamic, and more realistic perspective because we're not living in denial. So when we remember or realize impermanence, we relate to things a bit more realistically, But instead of doing this, we tend to cling to permanence, which is totally unrealistic. So for example, our jobs, we cling to our jobs as being permanent, and then when they finish, we suffer. Relationships, we cling to their permanence, and then when they finish, we suffer. So, trying to recognize impermanence, leads to us to relate to things a bit more realistically. Also, realizing impermanence helps us to lessen our negative minds. So, for example, if someone is insulting you or criticizing you, if we can remember in the impermanence of that situation, the impermanence of that person, then this helps to take the heat out of our angry response to them. If, for example, we're strongly attached to something, if we remember the impermanence of the object, this helps us to lessen the grasping, to the object. So if we really understand impermanence, then rather than trying to make something permanent that's impermanent, because we want to keep our attachment to it, instead we become wiser. We release the attachment that we have to it, we release the clinging. And when we do that, we release the worry and the anxiety that we have about losing it. And then when we're free of the anxiety and the worry, then we're much more open to enjoy what's there when it's there. And also, remembering impermanence makes it easier for us to practice positive minds, to strengthen our positive minds. So, for example, if we're in a difficult situation, if we can remember impermanence, then we can have patience for that difficulty. So we can think, this difficult situation is impermanent. It will finish, so I can be patient for it. If we see our relationships as temporary and permanent things, that helps to weaken our grasping, our wanting to possess, lessens our attachment, and instead increases our real love for that person, because we see that relationship, that person as precious. Then when we have good conditions, we value them, when we see that they're impermanent. This will end, so it's precious. We appreciate it. We make the most of it, when it's there. And then also remembering our life is impermanent. This helps us to value the time that we have, helps us to focus on what's really important to us. Then we can bring what's important to us in every moment of our daily life. So when we skillfully use remembering impermanence, it doesn't fill our mind with, morbid thoughts or stops us from leading healthy lives. Instead, it gives us perspective. It reduces our trivial worldly concerns and helps us to lighten up So we're not so weighed down with anxiety and frustration, with all the minor problems of our daily life. So realizing impermanence is actually critical for us, to help us to be less stressed and to help us to be more relaxed. So I hope you managed to do some meditation on impermanence in your daily meditation in the last couple of weeks and tried to be mindful of impermanence, in your day-to-day life. Today, I'd like to talk about developing equanimity and love and compassion. And we'll do this in two parts. First, we'll look at equanimity and then do a meditation to develop a sense of equanimity. Then we'll look at love and compassion and do a meditation to develop great love and great compassion. So we need to develop equanimity. This is an essential foundation for us to have a peaceful, relaxed mind. We need to have a more even and equal attitude to everyone. Because at the moment, we categorize people into friend, enemy, and stranger. So we care for our friends. We look after them. We want them to be happy. And friend here includes our relatives. Then we have hard or harsh or hurtful feelings towards an enemy. Communication is difficult with them. But when we say enemy, it doesn't mean that we're at war with someone. It could just mean someone who's hurt us in some way, or whoever it is that's making things hard for us at the moment. For the moment, it's whoever it is we're not getting along with. Then we feel neutral or indifferent to strangers. And this is because, you like your friend because they praise you. They do things that you find pleasant. You're critical of your enemy because they dislike you, they criticize you. And you feel indifferent to strangers because they've neither benefited nor harmed you. So when we see our friend, we have feelings of excitement. So our attachment develops. So attachment, is where we perceive a person as attractive, we exaggerate their attractiveness, and we have a wish to retain or possess them. So when we see a friend, we have this strong attachment or grasping for them. When we see our enemy, we feel fearful, we feel agitated. So our anger or our aversion develops. So anger is where we have aversion for someone, we exaggerate their faults, and then we have a wish to harm them. So when we see somebody we have some tension with, this is what happens, our anger arises. Then when we see strangers, we're bored, we're uninterested. So our ignorance develops. So our mind's going up and down like this all the time, depending on who we encounter, or even who we're thinking about at the moment. We see or think about our friend, we feel attached. We see or think about our enemy, our anger arises. We see or think about strangers, then our ignorance arises. So it's really hard to experience true peace, true happiness, when our mind's going up and down like this, much less develop, real love and real compassion for everyone. So what we need to do is to challenge the validity of our discrimination and our bias that we have towards people. So we think that people who are our friends are, it seems, from their own side, they are wonderful, good people. We think it's unrelated to us. But in actual fact, it's only because they do things for us, they support us, that they become wonderful. The person who's obnoxious, it looks like this because of something inside them. We think this has nothing to do with us, this person is just obnoxious. But actually, we give them the label obnoxious because they criticize us, or they don't agree with our ideas, or they get in our way. Then the people we feel indifferent towards, we feel are inherently uninteresting. But actually, we feel this because they don't affect us, they don't notice us, they don't give us things, or they don't support us. We think we're seeing everybody objectively. But what's the common theme here? It's what others do for us that determines our feelings of friend, enemy, or stranger towards them. It's not how they are from their side, it's our mind and what we make them into. Somebody is a friend because they think I'm wonderful. Now, is anybody who can't stand us who we think is wonderful? Of course not. Anyone who can't stand us is a horrible person. Also, we don't think of someone we can't stand as a wonderful person. So what's behind our categories of friend, enemy, stranger is what they do for us. And this is a really self-centered approach to how we view people and how we relate to people. Then we can see that these categories of friend, enemy, and stranger are actually uncertain, because people are not inherently friends, enemies, and strangers. So, for example, we can argue with a good friend and they can become an enemy. This might have happened to you. When someone stops giving our ego what it wants, then we stop finding them so attractive. Look at what happens when people become divorced. Once this person was our best friend, and now we can't bear to look at them. Sometimes we lose contact with our best friend. They become a stranger. We think about all the friends we had at school, all those intense relationships we had, how close we were. And now we don't even know where those people are. Then a stranger can become a loved one. And in fact, everybody was once a stranger to us. When we were born, we didn't know anybody. We didn't care much about anybody. Then some people started to help us. So we labeled them as friends and we got attached to them. Some people started not to give us what we wanted. So we labeled them enemy and we developed hostility towards them. So a stranger can also become an enemy, but they all started out the same as strangers. And when they're strangers, we don't care much for them. Then an enemy can actually become a friend. So, for example, we apologize to them. We give them a present, we praise them. Then they can become our friend. Or they apologize to us. They give us a present. They become a friend. Or we lose contact with an enemy, they become a stranger. So, strangers can become friends or enemies. Enemies can become strangers or friends. Friends become strangers or enemies. So all these relationships are in a state of constant flux. But when we don't see that these things are in constant flux, we just take the superficial appearance. We take how somebody's relating to us now as concrete reality, as a reason to either cling to them or to have aversion towards them or to be indifferent towards them. But because our relationships with others is so changeable, it actually makes no sense to put them into these hard and fast categories of friend, enemy, stranger, and then have strong feelings of attachment, strong aversion or indifference towards them. Then we can see that friend, enemy, and stranger are actually arbitrary distinctions. They actually depend on time and circumstances. So, for example, someone gives us $1,000 today. We think this is a friend. They become our friend. But tomorrow, they criticize us and they slap us. So they become our enemy. Someone else slaps us today and gives us $1,000 tomorrow. Which is friend? Which is enemy? So because of this changeable nature of our relationships, there's no reason to be so attached and to help only the friend. There's no reason to be so angry and to harm the enemy. There's no reason to be indifferent to strangers. In fact, all these discriminations are invalid. So we're actually trying to see all beings as equal and not to discriminate so strongly between them. Then, if someone is kind to you, you think they're a good person. When someone hurts you, you think they're a bad person. But in fact, both have good qualities as well as faults, because our view of others is so subjective. We look at someone, they appear wonderful. Somebody else looks at them and they appear obnoxious. Because we look from our point of view, the other person looks with a different point of view. The reality is that person has both good qualities as well as faults. Everyone has some attachment, some anger, some generosity, some love. It just depends on what they show to us. and what they show to other people. If someone shows their anger to us, they become our enemy. If they show their anger to someone we don't like, we think this person is smart and we like them because you can see that person is a bad person. But actually, we can train to have a more complete view of others, not to be so biased in the way we view others. Then we can actually accept the faults of our friends. Our intolerance towards our enemies decreases as we recognize their good qualities. It's very difficult to feel hostile towards someone when we contemplate all the good things that they've done, and all their good qualities. So when we can consider all the aspects of other people's personalities, then we'll be more balanced in our feelings towards them. When we're more aware of the changeable nature of our relationships, then we can be more balanced in our feelings for others. When we are aware of the subjective nature of our relationships, then we'll be more balanced in our feelings for others. Then, without strong attachment, strong aversion, and strong indifference, we can be more open and even towards others. Then also from their side, people that we consider friend, enemy, and stranger are actually equal. Regardless of how we categorize them, all of them equally wish for less suffering, but all continue to have pain and suffering. All of them equally want more happiness, but find it difficult to find true happiness. All are equally facing suffering and death. So, for example, if there were 30 old ladies living in a nursing home, each one of them was 100 years old, each one of them had cancer. Would we discriminate some as worthy of our love and compassion and some as not? They're all suffering equally. How could we not wish for them to be free of suffering? And so in the same way, all beings are equally afflicted with sufferings. Why should we discriminate who's worthy and who's not worthy of our love and compassion? We can't just look after the people who have helped us in this life and completely ignore, or be averse to everybody else. So we want to develop the recognition that there's no reason to be strongly attached to and help only the friend, no reason to be angry towards and have aversion for the enemy, and there's no reason to be indifferent and to ignore the stranger. All these discriminations are actually invalid. We need to see everyone as equal and not discriminate between any of them. And in that way, we equalize our attitude towards everyone. So what we're getting at is how unrealistic these attitudes of strong attachment and strong aversion are. What we're trying to do here is have more of a feeling of equanimity towards others. But equanimity doesn't mean indifference. There's a big difference between equanimity and indifference. With indifference, you're disengaged, you're uninvolved, you don't care, or you're withdrawn. That's not what equanimity is. Equanimity is you're open, you're receptive, but equally to everybody. Your mind is free of partiality and prejudice. So, for example, by freeing your mind of clinging or grasping or attachment, it doesn't mean that you disengage from that person. It means your mind is much more balanced. So you can feel close to that person, but also recognize they have some faults. They might not always fulfill your expectations or be there when you want them to be there. It's not because they mean any harm. That's just the nature of life. So we can let go of the strong expectations and the strong clinging, but we can still feel involved and engaged. So the mind of equanimity, is involved with others in a very open-hearted way. And that's what we're aiming at here, by freeing ourselves from the clinging, from the attachment, from the aversion, from the indifference, or from the apathy. An equal mind, this is what we're trying to have. With everybody we see, we try to have some kind of equal-hearted, openness towards them. Instead of feeling some fear or some suspicion or some need from them. So we're working at, an internal change in our perception here. So we still have friends. We're not saying get rid of your friends, get rid of your relatives. We still have people we're in closer contact with, that we have more common interests with, that we're responsible for, that we have relationships with. That's not the problem. It's the attachment and the grasping that makes the problem. That's what we're trying to work with here. So when we focus on equanimity, trying to have a more even attitude towards everybody, then our anger, our attachment, and our ignorance start to decrease, because we've made the objects of those emotions equal. And this then, this is what allows us to have a more peaceful mind, a more relaxed mind. Okay, so we'll do a meditation now to develop the mind of equanimity. So sit in a comfortable position, whether you're on a chair or sitting cross-legged on the floor. Whichever you're doing, make sure to keep your back upright and your spine straight. Place your right hand over your left, thumbs just touching and then resting in your lap. Your mouth is closed and your jaws relaxed. Rest the tip of your tongue at the back of your top teeth. Your head is fairly straight, just slightly bent forward, not too far forward or not too far back, or you'll fall asleep or get too agitated. Keep your eyes half closed and gazing down unfocused, but if that's too hard, then you can close your eyes or have them slightly open. Keep your shoulders level and your elbows should be slightly away from the body. So we start our meditation with generating a positive intention. Think, I meditate now to be free from suffering and to have all happiness, not just for myself, but to attain a state where I can then help others be free from suffering and to attain all happiness. Then we settle the mind with a few moments of breathing meditation. So breathing naturally and placing your attention on that process. Bring your attention inwards. Letting go of all your problems, your worries, your stresses. Just for the moment, let them all go and focus only on your breath. If your mind wanders off and you lose your concentration, notice where your mind has gone off to. Gently let go of the distraction and come back again to the breath. Think it's just a distraction. Gently let it go, come back to the breath. And keep coming back every time your attention wanders. Feel your mind start to settle now, become still, like a very deep, tranquil lake. Then we do a meditation to develop equanimity. To do this, visualize beings in 3 groups. Directly in front of you, visualize strangers. So all those people whom you don't know, to whom you feel neutral. Then slightly to the left, visualize all those that you would class as friends. So all your relatives, friends, anyone that you care for. Then to your right, visualize enemies. So anyone who has hurt you in some way, towards whom you have harsh or hurtful feelings, or it could be someone that you find it difficult to communicate with. Someone where there's some tension between you, perhaps. So strangers are the object of your indifference or ignorance. Friends are the object of your attachment. Enemies are the object of your aversion or your anger. Now analyze the process by which these discriminations are established. You find that friends become friends because they like you, they praise you, they do things you find pleasant. Enemies become enemies because they dislike you, they criticize you, hurt you, and do the things you find unpleasant. Strangers remain strangers because they've neither benefited nor harmed you. So it's this discrimination of people as friend, enemy, or stranger that causes an uneven state of mind. When you encounter a friend, you have feelings of excitement, elation. So the negative mind of attachment is strengthened in you and brings its own suffering. When you encounter your enemy, you feel fearful, agitated, anxious. Your anger is strengthened, bringing the suffering of anger. When you encounter a stranger, you remain bored and uninterested, and so strengthen your ignorance. So consequently, your mind is up and down, depending on who you encounter or who you're thinking about. And this limits your happiness and prevents you from having a compassionate and loving mind. So the next stage in the meditation is to look into and challenge the validity of these innate discriminations. And by perceiving how arbitrary they are, this helps us to make our mind establish us in a state of equanimity. So towards the objects of anger, meditate on this reasoning. It's true that the people that I group as enemies, with whom I feel angry, or I cannot communicate with them, might be harming and hindering me at the moment. But even an enemy can be won over and become a friend. If we apologize to them, or they apologize to us, we give them something, or they give us a present, they can become a friend. We can lose contact with our enemies and they can become strangers. So relationships change in this life. So by analyzing like this, we develop the recognition. There's no reason to harbor anger or to harm them, because they can change position. They can become strangers or sometimes friends. So in this way, the objects of your anger are equalized with all other beings. So hold this sense of equality single-pointedly. Then towards your objects of attachment, you can think, I'm fond of these beings. I'm attached to them now. But it is possible for a good friend to argue and then to become my enemy. Or it's possible that I lose contact with them and they become a stranger. There's no good reason then to be particularly attached to them now. So in this way, the objects of your attachment are equalized with all others. Hold the sense of the equality of these people single-pointedly. Then towards the objects of indifference, you can think, I'm indifferent towards these strangers. At the moment, they neither help me nor hinder me. But a perfect stranger can become a loved one. The people we're close to now were once strangers. There's no reason, therefore, to be indifferent towards these people. So in this way, your objects of indifference are equalized with all other beings. Hold this feeling of equality single-pointedly. So by analyzing in this way, you develop the recognition. There's no reason to be attached to and help only the friend. There's no reason to be angry towards and harm the enemies. There's no reason to be indifferent to and ignore the strangers. All these discriminations are invalid in failing to perceive how others are equal. The reality is that all beings need to be understood as equal, and I shouldn't discriminate between any of them. Then concentrate single-pointedly on the resultant feeling of equanimity. So this establishes equanimity from the perspective of yourself. The next stage of the meditation establishes equanimity from the perspective of others. So we recognize that regardless of how we categorize others as friend, enemy, or stranger, from their side, each and every living being is equal in wishing to have less and less suffering and wanting more and more happiness. But despite wishing to be free of suffering, every being continues to experience pain and suffering. Despite wanting more and more happiness, everyone finds true happiness difficult to find. Everyone is equal in the face of suffering and death. Everyone is equal in wanting more happiness. If this is true from their side, how can we discriminate who is or is not worthy of our love and our compassion? We reflect on the example of the nursing home full of 30 old ladies, each of whom was 100 years, each of whom had cancer. Would you discriminate some as worthy of your love and compassion as some as not? So in the same way, all beings are equally afflicted with the suffering of one sort or another. How can we discriminate, identify some as worthy of compassion and others as not, based on these fragile circumstances of this life's temporary relationships? by only looking after one set of people on the basis that they've helped you in this life, and to ignore, to be harsh or averse to others is not noble. So in this way we establish a clear sense of the equality of others from the point of view of their own fundamental needs and basic experiences of happiness and suffering. Then we concentrate single-pointedly on the resultant feeling of equanimity. So by focusing on this realization of equanimity, then your negative minds of attachment, anger, and ignorance decrease, because you've made the objects of those emotions equal. Okay. So then, building on from developing equanimity for everyone, we then try to strengthen and develop our love and compassion. So what we're trying to do is increase our love and compassion for others, not our attachment for others. So love is where we're concerned about the other person's happiness. Attachment is where we're concerned about our happiness, what they can do for us. So we want someone to be happy simply because they are there, they exist, not because what they can do for us. So love is the wish for others to have happiness. Great love is the wish for everyone, all beings, without exception, to have happiness and all the causes of happiness. So great love embraces everyone without discrimination. Compassion is the wish for others to be free of suffering. And great compassion is the wish for all beings, without exception, to be free of all suffering. Now, particularly now, we reflect on all the people in this world who are suffering from the sickness of the coronavirus. People who have lost loved ones, to the virus. And all the people who are suffering because they've lost their livelihoods. People who are feeling stressed or depressed or lonely from the lockdown. So we generate a feeling of compassion for all of them, wishing for all of them to be free of all these sufferings. So when we divide people into friend, enemy, and stranger, this is an artificial distinction, as we saw earlier. But if we can equalize others, have a more even attitude towards them, then we can start to develop love and compassion for them. Because from their side, everyone is equal. Everyone feels they equally deserve to be free of suffering and to have more happiness. So when we can see this, then we can start to have a more balanced attitude towards others. Then we ourselves can start to be more stable, more calm, more peaceful, stronger. Having love and compassion for others, paradoxically benefits us more than it actually benefits others. So love and compassion are very useful minds to cultivate if we want to be happy. Now, because when we let go of concern only for ourselves and we have concern for others, then we feel happy as a result. We have a mental ease. Our mind is happy and relaxed. When we meditate on love and compassion, when we genuinely wish others well, our mind is happy and relaxed. When we wish others harm, when we cling on to hurt and pain, our minds aren't relaxed at all. Our minds are quite tight, they're unhappy. So we'll bring a lot of happiness into our life, when we meditate on love and compassion. Not just the mental ease, but generally, conditions in our life, there's more happiness. Our body will also be more relaxed. You can see how your mind affects your body. When your mind's quite tight, it affects your body. You can get high blood pressure, your immune system goes down. But when your mind is very loving, very relaxed, then your body also tends to be relaxed. Now, we're not saying not to look after yourself or not to care about your own welfare. The thing is, if you don't have some love for yourself, it's very difficult to love others. So, we need to wish ourselves well. And some people might find this hard to do. So to start with, we can say, may I be well and happy. You want to wish yourself well in the sense of, may I have all the causes and conditions for genuine, long-lasting happiness. Truly wish yourself well. That's caring for yourself. So here we're talking about love and compassion for others, not having a self-centeredness, caring only for yourself and neglecting everybody else. People who are selfish can't actually perceive other people properly. They have a lack of empathy. But when we could start to generate more and more love and compassion, we feel naturally happy. We feel relaxed all the time. We see others in their most positive aspect. We relate to them as being kind. And this makes us loved by others. When you meet others, you're received with warmth and love because you bring happiness and love wherever you go. So having love and compassion, it's an energy that makes us happy by its very nature. It makes us more open to people, and because we're more open, it actually makes us wiser. And then we can see people who have strong love and compassion are actually popular people. Ethically, they're better people. And other people naturally gravitate to those people who are very kind, who have a loving heart. They don't actually need to do very much to have a lot of friends. But people who aren't loving, who are quite defensive, or, those people who are easily annoyed, it's much more difficult for other people to be friendly towards them. When we think about people who have a lot of hostility or hatred, people don't want to be around them. So they can be lonely and isolated. We can see this from our own experience. If we think about all the people whom we admire, for example, Nelson Mandela or the Dalai Lama, having a lot of love and compassion, is an attribute of them. And it's one of the best human attributes. And in Buddhism says that, all the positive minds can be developed. And scientists now has found that the brain has plasticity. It means that we can all cultivate all those qualities ourselves. And negative minds, these are the basis of our unethical actions. So, any killing or stealing or harsh speech and so on. The basis of these are negative actions. But if we can have love and compassion, this is the basis of having really good ethics. And having, cultivating more and more love and compassion helps at all levels. It helps at an individual level, our relationships with other people. It helps at the level of society, helps, groups of people in society get on better. And it helps the whole planet. The problems that we have with our planet, come from a lack of concern for others, and from having selfish concern only for ourselves. So love and compassion are very useful minds, for us to cultivate if we want to have, more and more true, genuine, long-lasting happiness. Okay, so let's do a meditation to develop the minds of great compassion and great love. So sitting again in the meditation position, and just for a few moments, settling the mind with a few moments of breathing meditation. But first, we do an analytical meditation to develop great compassion. First, reflect on your own physical and mental suffering. Whatever pain, physical or mental, that you might have, whatever suffering you have, reflect on it and see clearly how much you wish to be free of it. Then generate the wish for yourself to be completely free of all this and all suffering and all causes of suffering. This is self-compassion. Then reflect on the suffering experienced by those closest to you. Your parents, your partner, your children, other relatives, your friends, people whom you live with. Think for a moment of all their sufferings. Recognize their desire to be free of these physical and mental sufferings that they experience. Then generate the wish for them to be completely free of all these and all sufferings and all causes of suffering. This is compassion. Then extend your concern to embrace the suffering experienced by strangers. And then particularly focus on the suffering experienced by your enemies. They too experience pain and suffering. Then generate the wish for all of them to be completely free of all suffering and all causes of suffering. Then extend your view to embrace the suffering experienced in common by all human beings, such as birth, sickness, old age, death, and so on. Particularly at this time, see all the people who have the suffering of the coronavirus. Also the suffering of the wider effects of this, the grief, the stress, the loneliness, and so on. Generate the wish for all beings, all human beings, to be completely free of all these and all sufferings and all causes of suffering. Then see the ignorance, the fear, and other sufferings of the animals, suffering of heat, cold, hunger, thirst, being used and abused by others. Generate the wish for them to be completely free of all this and all suffering and all causes of suffering. Then reflect on all the beings of all other realms, beings in other planets, universes. Think of all the possible sufferings they may be experiencing. Wish for them to be free of all these sufferings. So then generate the thought, I wish for every single living being, without exception, to be completely free of all suffering and all causes of suffering. That is great compassion, and concentrate single-pointedly on that. Then we do an analytical meditation to develop great love. To do this, bring to mind someone who's been kind to you. Could be your mother, your father, some other relative, close friend, someone who's shown you great kindness. Bring them to mind. Then reflect on all the ways this person has been kind to you. Reflect on everything this person has done for you. How they've looked after you. When you think of this person and how all the ways they've been kind to you, naturally you have love for them. Love is the wish for them to have happiness. Concentrate single-pointedly on that feeling of love, the wish for that person to have all happiness, all causes of happiness. Then extend that feeling of love to more and more people. Extend that feeling of love to your friends, relatives. Wish for them to have happiness and all causes of happiness. Extend to strangers, even to enemies. Wishing them to have all happiness. Extend further to more and more people, people in this city, in your state, in this country. Wish for everyone in this country to have all happiness, all causes of happiness. Extend to include everyone in this world. Beings in other realms, the animals, spirits, beings in other planets, universes, and so on. Extend it further so that you include every single being without exception wishing every single being to have all happiness and all causes of happiness. And this is great love. You focus single pointedly on that feeling of great love. Then finally think, whatever love and compassion I've generated in this meditation, I'll carry with me at least for the rest of the day, bringing this feeling of love and compassion to every person that I meet. Okay, so if you want to read a bit more on this subject of equanimity and love and compassion, great love and great compassion, in the Essence of the Path to Enlightenment book, you'll find the section on equanimity on pages 107 through to 111. You'll find an explanation of great love and great compassion on pages 114 through to 118. If possible, in your daily meditation, try and include a meditation on equanimity, as we've done. And if you've got time, meditate on generating love and compassion. Also, in your day-to-day life, try to keep in mind this practice of equanimity. So, for example, anytime that you have to deal with someone, check to see what your feeling is towards them. Have you got strong feelings of grasping or aversion or ignorance towards them? Are you categorizing them as friend, enemy, or stranger? If you are, then challenge this bias. Think about the changeable nature of relationships. Think about the subjective nature of relationships. Think about all the aspect of others' personalities. And if you can do that, then see if this helps you to be a bit more balanced in your feelings towards them. At the very least, when you see someone whom you would consider as an enemy, whom you have some tension towards them, at that time, make a conscious effort to think about their good qualities, think about their good actions, then observe and see if your feelings of antagonism towards them starts to decrease, when you consciously do that. So that's your homework for this week. All right, so do you have any questions about what we've covered today? You can use the chat on the side there if you have any questions. Thanks, Nicola. I'm glad you liked the meditation. Thank you. So Kay says she's happy she's managed to see this on Facebook and she enjoyed it. Thank you. I'm very glad you enjoyed it. It looks like this is your first session. Jenny, helpful in your workplace? Yes. I think this this can be very helpful for, yes, work. You know, we tend to have people that we get on with at work, people we have some tension with. So, you know, trying to identify this and trying to have a bit more of an even attitude to people could be very helpful in the workplace. I agree. Yes. Margaret. Thanks, Margaret. Okay, if this is your first session, I'm interested if you've heard this description of trying to develop equanimity and seeing the description of seeing people, and that we tend to see people as friend, enemy, and stranger. I'm interested if this is the first time you've heard it, how you found that description, how you found that revelation. Because when I first heard this, you know, it came as quite a shock. It was a real, you know, eye-opener for me to realize that this is how, you know, I categorize people. So it had you know, had a big impact on me. It's not the first time. Okay, that's interesting. Kay's son teaches Buddhism. That's interesting. And Mary says, clear as usual, thank you. So they seem clear, easy to understand, but they're not if you think about them deeply. Yes, this is the thing, you know, and this is what I find in many concepts in Buddhism. We kind of know this already in some sense. We know that on some level we already know a lot of this. It's common sense, but we don't. It's like we know them, but we don't notice them. You know, we don't think about them deeply. We don't reflect on them. We certainly don't meditate on them. But it's only by thinking about them deeply, consciously thinking about them deeply, and then meditating on them, that they then start to have an impact on our mind. You know, even though we might know things intellectually, until we know them intuitively, they don't really have an impact on our life. So it's by meditating on these concepts, you know, that we start to understand them intuitively, and that's where it starts to then, you know, bring about some change, you know, in the way that we perceive things, in the way that we then experience things. So you're right. In some level, you know, they're kind of obvious, but you know, as you think about them, as you meditate on them, then they become more and more part of the way that you view things. That actually starts to impact your mind. Okay, if there's no more comments or questions, we might stop there. Here we go, Sebastian. You don't know what kind of day another person's having, so you could find them irritating or annoying. They might be having a bad day, yes. So it's good to remember they may not necessarily be a terrible person or an arrogant person. On another day, they might be having a better day. You might find them a better person. Exactly. That's what we're trying to get at. Trying to see the person in a more holistic way, not just focusing on one aspect of them. Okay, I think we better stop here, and I think I need to leave this going for a couple of minutes because some of you are a couple of minutes behind. So thanks everyone for your attention, and to do your daily meditation, if possible, to do a little bit of meditation on equanimity and try to bring this view of equanimity in your day-to-day life. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you next week.